You are viewing Leslie Weaver's Interpersonal Communications Project for Human Services 508 at Liberty University. In this presentation, we will define interpersonal communication. We will also identify an interpersonal communications master goal. We will look at potential barriers that can hinder us from reaching this master goal. We will look at noise pollution that can distract us from reaching our master goal. And finally, we will look at why it is important to enlarge our conversation with other people. First, let's look at interpersonal communication. Stewart defines interpersonal communication as a subset of communication, a type or kind of contact that happens when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of personal. Stewart also goes on to define interpersonal communication as communication that happens between persons, not between roles, masks, or stereotypes. At the beginning of this course, we took 2 self-assessments to help us determine our strengths and our weaknesses in relation to interpersonal communication and general communication skills. The first assessment was that to determine our behavioral blend. For me, my behavioral blend was a C. In dealing with a C, there are several things that will help to enlarge the conversation. In dealing with a C, you always know that we go by the books and we follow the rules, which means you know what to expect. We are results-oriented, which means we want to know what's going to happen. We are passionate about our quality of work, which also means that we're going to turn things in or do things with excellence. We tend to focus on the task at hand, which means we are going to get it done. And others view us as critical thinkers, which means we are going to come up with solutions. Now, in determining our strengths and weaknesses through the self-assessments, I was able to come up with a master goal to help me improve my interpersonal communication. For me, this master goal is to prioritize people over tasks by listening to what other people have to say to help me to enlarge my conversation. The C personality blend, or behavior blend, has a few things that can be potential barriers to reaching my master goal. These are passive tendencies, that we are solutions-oriented and focus on problems, and we can be critical of other people. I have been able to establish 3 ways that we can overcome these barriers. They are to practice and implement self-disclosure by building trust and deepening relationships with other people. We can focus on becoming an empathetic listener by not being critical or focusing on solutions. And third, we can implement effective listening techniques. Let's look at self-disclosure. Stewart defines self-disclosure as revealing to another person how you perceive and are reacting to the present situation and giving any information about yourself and your past that is relevant to an understanding of your perceptions and reactions of the present. Self-disclosure has a few characteristics that we can try to implement and understand in order to practice self-disclosure. These include focusing on the present rather than the past, responding to feelings as well as facts, and remembering in the early stages of self-disclosure that it is reciprocal. Stewart sums up self-disclosure by saying that healthy relationships are built on self-disclosure. In the movie Fireproof, we see self-disclosure modeled to Caleb by his father and by a co-worker. Eventually, Caleb is able to implement self-disclosure in his own life and in his own relationships. Next, let's look at listening. Listening happens on 3 levels. Level 3 listening is listening just in spurts. Level 2 listening involves only hearing the words. And Level 1 listening is empathetic listening. This is what we will focus on. There are a few characteristics to empathetic listening. Let's look at those. They involve not judging the talker. It also involves trying to understand the situation from the talker's point of view. We need to pay attention to both verbal and nonverbal cues from the talker. And we also need to provide verbal and nonverbal cues that we are listening. Buchanan calls this effective expression. It is acknowledging that you are listening, whether it be from a nod or a smile. By doing this, a talker is going to be more willing to provide information and the entire story. When there is a low level of effective expression, the talker tends to be more selective in their words and doesn't reveal the whole story. The third way that we can overcome barriers is by implementing effective listening techniques. Peterson challenges us to pick one or two techniques in his book and try to implement those. For me, those two include to acknowledge and to utilize para-thinking. Let's look at acknowledge. Peterson says to acknowledge is to use words, tone, and body language to indicate it's okay for the talker to feel or think the way the talker does. Para-thinking, according to Peterson, is to put the talker's thoughts, which include ideas, views, observations, facts, and perceptions, into your own words. So we just looked at barriers that could keep us from reaching our master goal. Now let's look at some things called noise pollution, which can distract us from reaching the goal. Noise pollutants are things both internally and externally that keep us from listening effectively. Internal noise pollution involves things people do internally or unconsciously that can interfere with effective listening. External noise pollution involves things externally that can interfere with effective listening. Let's look at internal noise pollution. Internal noise pollution includes things like filters, biased listening, green flag words, letting emotions cloud our view of listening, and somatic barriers. Let's identify some external noise pollution. These can include the talker's volume, the talker's mannerisms, loud noises, the room temperature, interruptions, fidgeting, doodling, stormy weather, or chewing gum, and last, the environment. There are some things that we can do to overcome noise pollution. These include becoming familiar with styles of listening and the key characteristics of these styles. It also includes using rephrasing to make sure you understand what is being said. We can evaluate our own expectations. Are we going into the situation with expectations, whether it be the speaker or the environment? We need to know and understand the symptoms of the flat-brained syndrome and what it takes to be involved in a flat-brained tango and how not to implement that. We need to decrease external barriers that can be controlled. Why is it important for us to enlarge our conversation? Stewart says there is a direct link between the quality of your communication and the quality of your life. Carbonell even goes on to say that the C personality blend tends to be prone to depression. And finally, Artin, Jansen, and Archer say that your personality type and your gender can impact how you deal with stress. This is important because how you deal with stress and how you cope is going to impact your level of anxiety and depression. As you can see, these three go hand in hand and affect each other. I think Stewart sums it up best when he says the quality of your existence directly links to the quality of your communication. So positive communication is going to help us decrease stress and improve our life. So let's look at the plan of action. For me, I'm going to implement my master goal in hopes of decreasing conflict and stress by being a more effective listener. This is going to help me to build deeper relationships and trusting relationships with other people.